This video will help you prepare for the first exam. It covers chapters 23 and 24, and we discuss GDP and CPI. GDP is defined as the market value of all final goods and services produced in a country in a given time period. Remember, the first thing about GDP is that we are measuring market value, not the physical quantity of items. So a liter of milk is much more expensive than a liter of gasoline in Saudi Arabia. Therefore, a liter of milk would add much more to the GDP than a liter of gasoline. Second thing to remember is all doesn't actually include all. There are several exceptions. Intermediate goods, illegal goods, used goods, and self-consumed goods are not included. Self-consumed goods are goods and services that someone makes and they don't sell. They actually consume them themselves. All items except those four are included in GDP. We also just count final goods. We don't count intermediate goods. The reason being is we want to avoid double counting. We also consider the period. Typically GDP is estimated on a quarterly basis and it's multiplied times 4 in order to express it on an annualized basis. GDP, the formula for GDP is consumption plus investment plus government expenditures plus exports minus imports, or the equation looks something like this: C plus I plus G plus X minus M. Remember, net exports are the X minus M variables. You can think of GDP as the size of the pie that a country creates, and GDP per capita is the size of the slice if we were to divide that pie by the population of that country. The size of each slice would be the average size that each person in that country would be creating in terms of the GDP. GDP per capita, we consider it to be one of the best measures for comparing standard of living between countries. We also want to remember how to do percentage changes. We'll see that a lot this semester. It's simply the new value minus the old value divided by the old value. We also want to remember that inflation is an important thing to consider in macroeconomics. There is a cause and an effect to inflation. The cause of inflation is when too much money is printed. The effect is that prices will go up. One day the price is 50, and if too much money is printed, the prices will eventually go up to accommodate that additional money that's in the system, and we will see price increases. This is important because we want to determine whether there has been a nominal increase, or in other words, if there's just been a price increase, or if there's been a real increase in GDP. So we have to convert nominal to real. In order to do that, we use constant prices or prices from a base year to actually compute what's happened to GDP. We want to use real versus nominal, or constant dollars versus current dollars or reals. Real prices will always have a base year. The GDP deflator that helps us analyze this, the formula is simply the nominal divided by the real times 100. The inflation rate, we can calculate by just looking at the value of the deflator from year to year. In this case, we would look at the deflator from year 2, subtract the deflator from year 1, and divide the deflator from year 1. You note that this is just a percentage change formula with the GDP deflator plugged into our values. Let's now look at a table comparing real GDP versus nominal GDP and how we could compute that. So we have 3 years worth of data, and the price, or the quantity of a good that was sold, and the current price each year. If we just multiply quantity times price, we would get the nominal GDP for that year. If we wanted to determine what the real price was, though, we would have to go back and look at the constant price, or the price of the 2010 year. You notice the prices went up from 2010 to 2012 from 5 to 7. If we hold those prices constant to the 2010 level, we would have a price of 5 for each year. Now when we multiply the quantity times the constant price, we would get the real GDP with a base year of 2010. Once we have that data, we can now calculate the deflator, and we can also calculate the inflation rate. Remember, the deflator is simply the nominal divided by the real times 100. The base year is going to be the same thing, 50 and 50, so our deflator would be 100. You'll note that each year there's a difference between the nominal and the base rate, and that's reflected in the deflator. To calculate the inflation rate, we just take the GDP deflators for the different years and subtract and divide by the base year, and that would give us the deflator or the inflation rate. Remember to multiply by 100 and add the percentage sign. Okay, let's talk about CPI. CPI is a measure of the overall cost of the goods and services bought by a typical consumer. In order to create a CPI system or an index, it's the Consumer Price Index. It entails 5 steps. First of all, we fix a basket, or we decide what items we're going to put in our shopping basket, and then we go survey and find those prices. We compute the overall cost of the basket, and then we choose a base year and compute the index. Remember, we set the base year equal to 100, and then each year we simply do this again. We use our fixed basket of items, we find the prices, we compute those costs, and then we see what the new value is and compare it to the base year. When we analyze the difference between the 2 years, we can compute the inflation rates. In this case, we also have to remember there are a couple of problems with the CPI. The substitution bias, in other words, when prices go up, people tend to substitute. Also, when new products are introduced, it's somewhat subjective when that new product gets included in the basket. And also there are changes in quality over time, and how that gets accounted for can sometimes be an issue. The inflation rate is simply we're taking the CPI from year 2 and subtract from year 1 and divide by year 1. We can do that for any 2-year period that we want to compare. So that is our preparation, GDP and CPI. Good luck.